Avadisesha aloka pravesha nitrachari utajiva polo hari hari mukunda murare Ramo Krishna Hayagriva Nrsimha Vamana Shri Manusudana Rajendranandana Shyama Putana Gatana Koetabashatana Jaya Dasarati Rama Yashoda Dulala Govinda Gopala Vrindavana Purandara Gopi Priyajana Radhika Ramana Bhuvana Sundara Bara Avanata Karamakana Taskara Gopi Jana Vastrahari Prajera Rakala Gopa Vrindapala Chitahari Vamsidhari Yogindra Vandana Shri Nandanandana Rajajana Vayahari Navina Nirada Rupa Manohara Mohanavam Sivihari
Gave me a plate piled high with food. I drifted into vegetarianism several years ago, but this looked a lot better than the food I usually ate. I've been experimenting with macrobiotic food and often ate at a restaurant called The Paradox on the Lower East Side, a place that I learned a few years later was frequented by Yoko Ono. Macrobiotic food was not particularly inspiring for me, and the Swami's vegetarian food looked appetizing and exotic. Instead of bland brown rice and zucchinis, sesame seeds, and beans, the spread before me consisted of hot dal made with lentils and vegetables and fresh herbs, steaming fluffy rice, warm wholemeal chapatis brushed with a little butter, lightly spiced potatoes, and warm milk with bananas. Suddenly, I was hungry. "Yeah, I'm fine, Swami," I said. "How do you like your new place?" It was the first time I sat with him to talk for some time. Very nice, and the temple is nice also." He turned his attention to the man sitting to the left. Stanley, take. He kept handing Stanley warm chapatis. Stanley was nearly 6 feet tall, gaunt and emaciated looking, with short black hair, stubble, and a sharp, angular feature. After 11 chapatis, the Swami laughed heartily and said, "My spiritual master didn't like fat disciples." Stanley just shrugged off the Swami's comment and kept eating. But I thought I saw a slight smile on his face and sensed that he was laughing internally with the Swami. So that's the end of the first chapter. If you want to get this book, you can probably get it in Mayapur. That's the
We have it in there.
Sure, we have it
in school.
Oh, good.
Most of us, right?
I'm sorry I lost this place that was marked.
It's like we are marked.
So anyway, if you have any comments or questions about any of this, now's the time to ask.
I was just wondering if you could go into more detail on just like what those early days were like with Srila Prabhupada. And
Well, what it was like was kind of an oasis in the middle of a desert for me. It was like I was a seeker. It was something like I was reading the Swami's books, the Srimad Bhagavatams, and I was reading constantly, non-stop. Even when I went outside, I would have the book and I would be reading and walking. And sometimes I would almost get smashed by cars. I did feel that something great was happening, even though I didn't really like the environment of New York City. But that's kind of, I didn't really know what I was doing or what it was going to lead to, but I just felt like I had kind of like found something that was very worthwhile.
Are there any anecdotes of Srila Prabhupada that you didn't put in the book?
Not many. Because what happened was I would arise very early in the morning, about 2:00 a.m., and try to remember things. So not very many things were left out.
Maharaj, you were there from the very beginning. As ISKCON progressed and developed, how did Srila Prabhupada's mood change, or did it change?
Well, it didn't change in the sense that they always had a kind of intimate relationship with every disciple, but in another sense it did change because it became more difficult to gain access to him because he was surrounded by so many people. He was also a manager, and having been a manager, he realized that it's not possible to be with all the employees as much as they would like the head of the organization to be with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very fortunate in that I got to have a lot of personal contact when there weren't very many devotees around. There was no ISKCON then either.
Yeah.
There's no Mayapur then either. And New York City is a kind of and that part of New York City especially is a kind of unusual place for a movement to start, because it's like Skid. You know what Skid Row is? It's like bums, Bowery bums live down there. That's where Prabhupada started out. Well, not exactly. I guess you could say he started in another place, uptown. It was a little bit better neighborhood. But he was up there for about maybe 6 months, and then
was that the apartment in upper floor?
Dr. Mishra's place, in the upper floor on the Upper East Side. I think it was in the 60s. And he got this loft because a guy named Harvey said he could use it, but what he didn't say was that there was someone else in there, a young boy about 18 years old named Paul. Paul was kind of like a problem for Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada left that place after a while.
Was he the one that had the crazed, drug experience?
Well, in Bhakti True Maharaja's book and in the film Abhay Charan, he comes across as being a drug addict kind of, and he was a little bit mentally unbalanced. I don't know if it was because he was using drugs or if he was using drugs because of that. He was there, and I thought he was kind of like a sold-out slave, and I didn't think I wanted to be like that. I was 24 years old and he was 18, so there was a difference. His attitude was very, very much of a servant, and mine was more or less, kind of like checking it out.
Seeing if you'll buy into it or not.
Maharaj, how did you feel when you first saw Srila Prabhupada?
How did I feel? Well, I felt that Prabhupada was a very wise person. He was wearing specs. They were red, and I felt like I'd come in contact with a very learned person, and the fact that he was lecturing in this place in the Bowery, which is like a haven for bums and full of flop houses and bars, and like I said, the whole place smelled like a mixture of urine and beer. I felt very fortunate that I had met this person who was, seemingly very oldish, in his 60s or 70s, and that he was lecturing in a place like the Bowery, and he had such a kind of plaintive tone when he spoke that I thought that he had a very important mission. So I felt very, very lucky, very fortunate that I met him. That's how I felt.
I was wondering if you could go into a little bit. Somehow or other, I've heard a lot of the New York, but I never really heard a lot of detail on how the San Francisco temple opened, how that whole West Coast scene started.
The way it started was that the Prabhupada went there. First I went there, and I was joined by Shyamasundar and Gurdas and their wives. And we were there for about 3 or 4 weeks before we thought it's time to ask the Swami to come here. We called him the Swami from New York City to San Francisco, and it was a long distance away, maybe 4,500 kilometers or something like that. So the other end of the country, the West Coast. So we went into a phone booth, Shamsundar and I, and said that you should come to San Francisco. And we had organized this mantra rock dance before we talked to Srila Prabhupada. And it was with some big name groups, rock and roll groups like Big Brother and the Holding Company and Moby Grape and a few others. And the Grateful Dead, they were very famous. And then we had met some people who it was kind of a movement in San Francisco at that time. It was a hippie movement. Mm-hmm. And they thought that they were the sort of like rulers of the world, that they were going to change everything. That they were against the Vietnam War, and they wanted to legalize LSD, they wanted to lower the voting age. Those were the three main functions of the hippies. It's the three main philosophical points that they were there for. They wanted to lower the voting age, stop the war in Vietnam, and legalize LSD.
Profound. Profound.
Yeah, which they didn't do. Anyway, so we had some meetings with some of them, and they sort of liked Hare Krishnas. And they told us that the dance, we called it the mantra rock dance. We had organized this in one of the big, there were 2 ballrooms. There was the Fillmore Ballroom and the Avalon Ballroom. So this was organized for the Avalon Ballroom. And so we got the Grateful Dead and Big Brother and Moby Grape to agree to play for free. This is going to be a benefit for the Hare Krishnas. And the Musicians Union made us pay them something, but it was a very small amount compared to what they usually got. And so then when we met with these leaders of the hippies, they said that you have to have another personality besides the 3 bands, even though they're big names. You need, if you want to attract people, because this was going to occur on a Sunday night, and usually the big events happen on Friday nights and Saturday nights. So he said you need another famous band. So we didn't know any of it. But this man knew Allen Ginsberg, one man that we met with, one of the hippies, and we kind of knew that he had met with Prabhupada. So then he said, I know Allen. And he said, this man, this hippie man, leader, and he said, I'll phone him. And you'll come back in about a week and we'll see what happens. So we went back there in a week, and he said, I've talked to Allen Ginsberg and he's coming out here. So he was going to take an airplane to San Francisco. So when we called Srila Prabhupada, or we called him the Swami, we said that he should come for this event and he should speak. And he was very eager to come. He said, "Okay, I can come." And he said, and then we ended the conversation, and then he said, "But then how will I pay for the ticket?" Because we hadn't thought about that really. And then this other man in the phone booth, and we were in the phone booth making these calls. It was a long distance call from San Francisco to New York, and we had to keep putting money into the slots. And so we finally told Prabhupada that we'll pay for the ticket in San Francisco. But he'd never heard of this system where you could pay in one city and they would issue a ticket in another city. So we had to explain how this all worked. And we said we would pay for it. He would just go and give his name, show his passport, and they would give him the ticket. And so he agreed. And then a week later he came. Wow. And he spoke in the temple, and about a week later he went to this big event and spoke. That's how it started.
So this was all arranged, you said, like 4 weeks just after you got to San Francisco? Mm-hmm. So things were happening pretty fast.
Yeah. Yeah, very fast.
And then you stayed around in San Francisco after that, or you went straight to...
I stayed around San Francisco for about almost a year, and then I went to Los Angeles, and then Prabhupada went down there. Another devotee went out to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and that's how it kind of all started. But it took Prabhupada being there before, and things got underway. We just kind of relied on him to be because he was the guru there. And he was, the person we wanted to introduce all the hippies to. And that's what happened. And he was very happy.
At this point, when you were getting all this done, did you already like fully identify yourself as a devotee, or were you still just kind of a well-wisher, or like what was your personal kind of motive and mood when you were organizing all these things on the West Coast specifically?
Well, I thought it was part of the Hare Krishna movement. I didn't really know what a devotee was, but I identified with it, and whenever I had to speak, I would say Namo Vishnu Padaya. I didn't even know what it meant. I sort of know what it meant, but really. But I identified with as a devotee, even though I didn't know what it was. And a lot of people joined the temple in those days. And a lot of people also joined and they went away. When Prabhupada spoke at that big event at the Avalon Ballroom, there was one devotee that he came with on the airplane that left that night. He started dancing with the girl, and so that was the end of the event. We never saw him again. Wow. So Prabhupada told us that he looked very dejected when that man told Prabhupada that he was leaving the next day after the event. And that was the end of him. And then later on, Prabhupada told us that we shouldn't be surprised how many people leave. We should be surprised how many people stay. Mm-hmm. But that was pretty interesting.
From your observation, why do you think it is that so many more people were joining back then?
Well, sociologists would say that that was good timing. Because there were a lot of people that were seekers and searchers in that area, among the hippie crowd. So I don't know if more people were joining, because so many people were leaving, but they were at least temporarily joining because they were looking for something, and Prabhupada and Buddhism was very popular as it is now, even then, among the hippies. But there were a certain group of people that were attracted to Krishna consciousness. They really liked the food, they liked the hospitality, they liked the vibrations, they liked everything about it. And sometimes there would be like 60 or 70 people in the storefront for prasad or for a Sunday feast, or more than that, just crowded in there, just to see what it was like. And several of them joined. Sociologists would say that it was and even people in this country like Sri Prahlad, who has a PhD in something, said that it was a time of big advancement because there were so many people joining the movement at that time. It was a time of big advancement. Just like when later on devotees went to England and they got the Beatles involved, that was a time of big advancement. So his theory is that all the big advancement periods happen when celebrity types of people or large numbers of people join, or large groups somehow or other join. That's one theory. But the sociologists think that was the reason that there were so many seekers in that area that's why it was so successful so quickly in that area.
What do you think would be the most effective way of kind of bringing back that success now?
More Harinam, I think, because everyone is more Harinam and prasadam distribution. People are attracted to the holy name, the sound of the music, and they're attracted to the food. Mm-hmm. And the hospitality, like Nalhan organizations, Bhakti Vriksha, they like the vibrations, the environment of being with devotees. Yeah. Yes?
Did Prabhupada ever get quite homesick when he was traveling and being in all the new areas?
I don't think he ever got homesick in the sense that we sometimes get homesick. Mm. Like I sometimes get homesick for my relatives in Oregon and in the United States. But there was one letter that came where one of Prabhupada's relatives, I think was one of his I don't know, it was was an uncle or a son had died, and Prabhupada just, we didn't know what the letter was, and Prabhupada put the letter aside. Then one devotee asked him what was all that about, and he said it was about the death of so and so and so and so, and Prabhupada didn't seem to be fazed. He just carried on the conversation where it left off. But there was never any incidences that he was home. He would talk about India a lot, how great the Vedic culture was and that sort of thing. But he never manifested like he wanted to go back there because he wanted to see his relatives or his old friends. He kind of felt that his real home was in the spiritual world or in the country where he was preaching, wherever that was, outside of India, I mean. But he did foster the sense of India and Vedic culture is really important, and he fostered the sense of we have to all go there someday and see what it's like, because Vrindavan is like the spiritual world. Of course, Mayapur is too. He instilled that idea that somehow we have to visit these holy cities, like Mayapur and Vrindavan. Even Mumbai, he considered that was a very important place.
You were saying that as the movement developed, it was harder for devotees to have more access to Prabhupada, and when I joined, it was like that. You were very. I particularly felt fortunate in Mayapur because Prabhupada came more, and you could have more personal association with Srila Prabhupada. But with devotees like your good self and Malati and Shamashunda and Guru Das and devotees like that, even though the movement had burgeoned and there was so many devotees around Prabhupada, did Prabhupada always give his very, very early devotees special treatment or special access to him?
I think so. I don't know if you heard what Rupa was saying, but if Prabhupada gave special sort of attention to early disciples, even though the movement had progressed and there were a lot of other people around him, other minions and associates and assistants. And I think it's true that he did always sort of honor the first devotees, because he was very personal, and he had that kind of a relationship that we have with some of our early friends. That we always have it's kind of like a warm spot in our hearts for them. So he had kind of like a very warm spot in his heart for all of his early disciples. So even though that he was surrounded by assistants and secretaries and people like that, if someone who was from the early days came to see him, he gave them special preferential treatment. It was a nice thing. But I heard from others that that ISKCON had become bureaucratic, and it was harder to have a personal association with Prabhupada as time went on. But I personally didn't experience that because I was one of the early ones.
Well, I was lucky because I could clean Prabhupada do personal service and like that. For about 2 months, Prabhupada was somewhat ill. I think it was in 1976. For 2 months, he just stayed in Mayapur, and then every afternoon from 4 to 7, we would sit in Prabhupada's darshan and just stay there for those hours until the evening arati, and Prabhupada would send us to the evening arati. So it's very, very wonderful.
You're very lucky.
We hear so many stories in the early days of Srila Prabhupada would do everything, cooking, cleaning. And then I think at some point the devotees kind of figured out that he was doing everything on his own, and they started helping. What was that feeling like, realizing or starting to relate to him as a spiritual master?
I kind of thought it was a kind of a natural evolution that a movement, if it was going to be a movement or institution, would naturally become more bureaucratic, and that the head of the institution would be more difficult to have a personal relationship with. But at the same time, Prabhupada did have a personal relationship with every devotee, even though the institution had become very large and had many levels of management. time, I think it was in 1972, Srila Prabhupada said that he was going to concentrate on writing books and not manage. And at that time, Shri Kirti tells us about this. Karanda, this was in Los Angeles, and Karanda, who was the head of the temple in Los Angeles, came up to Prabhupada's room, and in his breast pocket was sticking out a letter. And this was just at the time when Prabhupada was saying he wanted to renounce management and he would concentrate on writing. And he asked Karanda, he said, "What is that?" He said, "Oh, it's just a letter." He said, "Who from?" He said, "Oh, it's just a letter from one of your disciples in some other country." And he said, "What is it? Can you read it to me?" And according to Shri Kirti, that was the end of Prabhupada's initiative to only write and not manage anymore, not have anything to do with any devotees. So he had a very personal relationship, and this was somewhere on the other side of the world. But he took it very seriously, and he wrote back to that devotee, I think. That was another thing we realized, that Prabhupada answered all the letters, as far as I know. Any devotee in any part of the world would write him, and he would write him. Of course, they were longer in the beginning. The letters were longer and more comprehensive. They got shorter and shorter as time went on. I think it's time for prasadam now. We can continue this discussion while we're waiting and eating.
Well, we have the table set up outside because there's a bit more space, and we can do some lines or however everybody fits, if that's okay.
Oh, please.